Welcome to the Cherish and Conquer podcast, the show dedicated to celebrating female entrepreneurs' strength, resilience, and innovation. Be inspired by stories of women and what they cherish to help them conquer against all odds. Every other week, you will learn from remarkable women on how they navigate challenges, uphold their values, and create sustainable success. And now, here's your host, Jim Rembach.
Welcome to the Cherish and Conquer podcast. I have the blessing to interview somebody who I had the chance of interviewing 4 years ago, pre-COVID. And I'm really excited to hear about where she is right now in her entrepreneurial journey and some of the innovative and, quite frankly, just for me, very provocative in a lot of ways work that she's doing. So we're going to talk about that in a second. But before we do, we're going to get to know a little bit more about her and how she's making an impact in other people's lives. And her name is Tamara Ghandour. Tamara, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jim, it's great to be here. And it's good to see you again after seems like 20 years, but 4 years, I guess. We did a lot in 4 years.
That's what I mean. And when you think about pre and post pandemic, that's how we refer to things a lot of now. And it's like, wow, a lot has changed since then. But I think what has not changed is that you are making a significant impact in people's lives. And so if you could kind of give us some insight and understanding into how you are doing that with the work that you're doing.
Yeah. My company, kind of our flagship or what we really focus on is human-centered innovation. So we have an assessment tool. It's the Innovation Quotient Edge. It tells you your everyday innovator archetype. There's these 36 different archetypes, 252 combinations when you add in our dormant, but not to get into the science of it, but to say that that's the tool that we have really used to make an impact in the world. Because instead of going out to people and saying things like, oh, you need to navigate change. Change is the only thing that's consistent. You need to be resilient. You need to be adaptable. All the things we hear over and over again. What we've really done is help people figure out how they do it in a way that's natural and also unique and differentiating for them. So, I love it, Jim, because people will take the assessment. In fact, I was just at a conference in Kansas City a few days ago, and this woman came up to me and she just took a deep breath and was like, oh, now I see how I can lead and deal with the changes and not be so tired and stressed out and like what I can do in my way. So we're not telling people to learn new skills about them, but really in a way that really resonated with her and gave her a sense of confidence and a sense of ease in how to move forward. Because look, we all know, you said it, pre and post COVID, we've had 4 years of being resilient, of changing quickly. AI's creeping up on us, other technologies behind us. So I think that's kind of the short of it is we're giving people what they need to be their best selves in the environment that we're in.
Okay. And from a perspective, so you had said during our last interview at that time that innovation is survival. We don't have a choice. And so if we think about it from that perspective, we really have to know what our everyday innovator style is. Because in order for us to talk about survival, resilience is key. Clarity is key. All of these things that I think from a, confidence perspective, become important. How do you know when to stay the course? How do you know when to redirect and pivot? How do you know all of those things? So if you could kind of help us understand that, because otherwise it's just a world, like you were saying, of confusion, because we're told all these things and we're like, how?
So here, I might get the number a little bit wrong because I never remember stats. I have them on slides half the time, but go with me. I'm about right. It was from the World Economic Forum, and it was something to the effect of, 46% of jobs are going to be disrupted by 2026, right? Which is right around the corner. And what it's really telling us is that the things that are on our bullet points of what we do and how we do them are not the things that we need to be successful moving forward, because new challenges, new worlds, right? They require new thinking. So when we think about our skills and our abilities, what's really important is creative problem solving, analytical thinking, strategic thinking, decision making, confidence, adaptability, to your point, resilience. And those are the things that it's actually hardwired into our brain. So what the archetype tells you, what our everyday innovator archetype tells you, is how you do it at your best. I think the challenge, I don't know, Jim, if you're guilty of this, but I know I have been, where I've seen somebody else and how they're kind of these super cool innovators, and I don't know, success always seems to follow them. And there's never been a problem they can't solve or an opportunity they can't create. So I try to do it like them, but then I fail. So I feel like a failure. And then I'm stuck behind because innovation is survival. But what we've kind of discovered in our research is that if we do it in the way that works for us, then we can actually be successful at it. And it's kind of like working smarter instead of working harder. We can white knuckle all day long, but if we're doing what we've always done, we're just in the same place, right? We're on a treadmill and we're just going faster, but we're not getting anywhere. And I don't know about you, but I don't like to run. So yeah, it doesn't work for me.
Well, as you were saying that, I started thinking about some of the other areas of work that I've been exposed into, and it seems like there's some similarities in regards to what you're talking about too, like a Gallup Strength Finder. How do I find my strength so that I can excel at my strength? How does that compare?
So I love all assessments because they tell you something. And if they tell you something that's valuable to you, I think it's good. However, here's where we're a little bit different. So Strength Finders, Myers-Briggs, like all those, they tell you a little bit about who you are or how you think you behave. What we're doing is saying, no, let's open up this window into this incredible mind that you have between your ears. And let's discover how you, Jim, and you, Sally, and you, Gail, how you each are hardwired to be high performing and be your best self. And it's not just so that we can be these high driver productivity crazy people. It's so that we can actually move with a little more ease and a little more velocity and tackle the things that are in front of us in smarter ways that actually move us forward. So that's where that's where our assessment is actually very different. It's all about who you are, how you're wired, and how you add value to the world. So not just what you do, but really what's inside of you that is actually you at your best. Can I share a story real quick, Jim?
Yeah. Yes, please.
Okay. So here's how I want people to think of it when they're listening. When I was 14, I loved fashion. Now it was the 80s. So Jim, I don't know if you're to date myself, I'm not sure how old you are, but I will tell you that fashion wasn't good, but I had the pegged pants and the, shoulder pad sweaters and the off the shoulder Madonna sweaters and the jelly shoes. Right. So, all my money went to my clothes. I had closets full at 14. And as girls do when they're 14, my friends would come over and borrow my clothes, right? You have daughters, right? That's what girls do. We come over, like you spend all the money for your daughter and then her friends are the ones buying coming over and wearing the clothing. That's how girls work. So one day my friend Jill is in my closet and she's pulling out some jelly shoes and some scrunchies and whatever else. And I just had a moment of like, oh, I think there's an opportunity here. So as she came out of the closet, I looked at her and I said, that'll be $3. Now, this is before the internet. This is before rent-a anything like you can do today. This was just me in my home, right? Seeing an opportunity and jumping on it. And I share that story because if we all go back into our childhood, there are clues to who we are at our best, our most innovative, right? Our everyday innovator self. We just have to go look back and find them. I'm sure, Jim, you have stories from your childhood of things you did. Now, fast forward, my archetype today is something called the pioneer, which means I'm experiential and risk-taking. I'm all about action and motion and like doing it in the moment. That's how I innovate. And about risk-taking and being bold and being uncomfortable. So if you look back at that moment, you see it, right? I did it at 14. Now, in life, it gets beat out of us, right? They tell us not to do it at work. We get punished for drawing outside the lines for whatever reason. Like creativity is disruptive to other people. So we shut it down over the years. But for you and for all the listeners out there, if you look back into your childhood, the clues of who you really are at your best, your most innovative self, because it's in all of us, it's there.
Okay. So this is for
Do you
me.
have a story, Jim?
Well, beyond the story, I'm trying to get to clarity. Okay. Because I mean, if you say the words hardwired, right? You say hardwired. However, I mean, when we're born, we're not hardwired for anything. I mean, we're totally dependent on somebody keeping us alive. So help us understand what you mean by hardwired, because these things are, some of it is inherited as far as traits. Some of it is just totally conditional. I mean, there's stories and stories of twins that were totally separated, and one grew up to be, a villain, and the other one was, essentially the law enforcement person. All kinds of things like that. So help us understand
every Marvel movie.
Pardon me?
I would say every Marvel movie, like one grew up one way and one grew up another way.
That's a great point. So tell me what you mean by hardwired.
Yep. Yeah. So great question. And I love the neuroscience. So I'm going to geek out with you for a minute. So I used to think that being an innovator, being innovative, right, how I approach the world was something that was for the select few. There was just those people who were just something was bestowed upon them at birth. Or it was for specific times, like those aha magical moments that you can't control, or a crisis, because, who doesn't? Like in a crisis, you have to innovate. So the pressure kind of brings it out. But when I dug into the 25 years of my work and the neuroscience and behavioral psychology, and like we dug into the research. So this isn't a quiz. This is our assessment is really based on this science behind it. So here's what I found. Number one is we actually all have the tracks for innovation and intelligence, and they're actually distinct. So intelligence is deep groove superhighways, and innovation is loosely connected side roads across your brain. But we all have them. Now, there's two other points of this that are really important. We used to think that innovation was to a certain part of your brain. So if you had it developed, right, you were very creative, or your left brain versus right brain kind of thing. Turns out that's not true. What brain mapping is showing is that when we create a problem solve, when we innovate, the whole brain actually lights up. So it's those loosely connected side roads. The part that I think is most important is that we have something called neuroplasticity. So that means our brains are actually flexible. And it used to be believed, get this, that when you were 25, your brain stopped growing, evolving. So what you had is what you had. You were done at 25, which is unfortunate for people like me who are double that. So I'm happy to know it's not true. So our brain isn't technically a muscle, but in this way, it actually acts like one. So the more we exercise it, the stronger it gets. And research time and time again has shown that if we learn a new skill, we change the wiring in our brain. So we have the ability, right? We have the tracks laid down. That's what I mean by hardwiring. Some of us practice it more often than others. That's it. And I have seen people go from the ones that you would expect the least innovation from to being the most innovative in how they approach things because they start to practice, right? They exercise, they feed it the right thing. So when someone comes to me and says, Tamara, I don't have that, right? That's not wired into me. What I know they're really saying is, well, it's exhausting and it's hard because I haven't been using it. So if you think about the last time you took a break from exercise and then went back, it doesn't feel so hot on day one. So the same thing is true with our brains, right? We got to exercise it. We got to feed it. So that's what I mean by hardwiring is we have it, but we also need to use it. And our brains have this incredible ability to get stronger no matter what your starting point is.
Okay. So then if I put that in context, because I know, are you still doing a whole lot of CrossFit yourself?
Yes, I am. It's funny. I'm doing a competition tomorrow. It's funny that you asked. Good timing.
Oh, good luck with that. Okay. So if I put that in context of, say, maybe I am a person that is somewhat athletically fit, but if I start to do CrossFit, that's a whole different ballgame.
Sure.
Right. So if the brain is a muscle,
yeah.
And I'm talking about not having to have exercised or worked that muscle in that way, what can I get in regards to an expectation of impact? And before, as far as me focusing in, working in, and developing, and getting to the point where I increase my innovation skills.
Yeah. So I want to back up and define innovation for a second, because I think that's going to open up whole new pathways for people. Because I think sometimes, with innovation, it's one of those funny, lofty, misunderstood words. And when we think about innovation, this is the definition that we use that makes it accessible to all of us. Because what I'm not saying is you'll become Elon Musk and you'll create the next, I don't know, water-powered, hydrogen-powered car. I don't know what's next. So sorry if anyone out there knows what they're talking about with cars, but you get my point. What you will do is drive innovation in your day every day. So the definition is this: thinking differently about what's right in front of you to create an advantage. So a new perspective, a new approach, right? Thinking differently. What's right in front of you, your challenges, your opportunities, your resources, what's on your desk. It doesn't have to be blue skies. Sometimes the best breakthroughs come from rearranging the box that you have. So, and that's important because I think what we realize, and to your point about impact, what people realize when they understand how their brain is wired to be their best and they start to feed it that fuel to make it happen and to be there more often, what we discover is that people start to see opportunities for improvement and innovation in everything that they're doing. It can be everything from how they, schedule their day and their workflow to that big breakthrough idea that's going to push them into the marketplace and get the competitive advantage. But we need all of it. We can't relegate innovation to this little, crazy blue sky thing only. We'll never get there. We'll never get there. But if we do it in little bits every day, we get the compounding value from it. And when we understand our archetypes, right, there's a whole different archetype that is collaborative and inquisitive when you put them together. And what's cool about them is they're really good at digging deep and challenging assumptions, innovations in the questions, and gathering buy-in and feedback and kind of pulling things together. So that's not me. I don't do it that way. I'm all about leaping. And that person does it their way. So we can set ourselves up for success instantly simply by understanding how we show up in the world, but also how we can operate in the world that's best for us.
Want more insights from female entrepreneurs? Get complimentary access to Marina's Army for additional tips, tools, and tactics from this episode. Just go to Mirina.ai and click Community for access. Now, let's get back to the conversation.
Okay, so you talked about the definition of innovation. Maybe it's also a good idea, and if I recall, we have also explored this a few years ago, so I'd love to get the update on it, is the underpinning of innovation is really the ability to be more creative in our thinking. So creative thinking and innovation. Help us understand the difference between the two.
Yeah, so here's why we went with innovation and not creativity. Because when you put the word creativity out into the world, and when you kind of look it up and how people apply it, it is very much applied to the pursuit of an artistic approach. So people will tell you to be more creative and to do things like, learn how to dance, calligraphy, painting, photography. Those are all actually very creative outputs, and I appreciate all of them. What we wanted to do was give people a definition and create a world that was about what they're doing every single day. So look, I'm not a creative person. Everyone thinks I'm going to be, but I have every Pinterest fail out there. None of those things I've ever been able to do because I can't create a snowman out of tongs and what are they called? Those little like Q-tips, whatever. I can't do it. So that's really creativity. And it ultimately ends up in the outcome of like this artistic pursuit. We wanted it to be about how do you create an advantage every single day with what you have right in front of you. So to me, that's the fundamental difference between the two and why the kind of stake that we put in the ground is over here on the right.
Well, I think what you're saying is an important clarification point in regards to people trying to be able to grasp what it is that you like you said, what you're really referring to and what the ultimate outcomes will be versus the artistic endeavor component. But from a scientific perspective, I have always been exposed to we need to improve our creative thinking skills in order to be able to innovate. Because if we don't do divergent, thinking and then understand convergent thinking and how those two can be essentially either generate value or not, and how to execute that, we're going to have a problem. So I think for me, that's where I want to make sure that we don't add to the confusion in saying that, no, innovation doesn't require creative thinking skills, but it's like, oh, wait a minute. So, and I get it. And I get it from a marketing perspective and a connection perspective. But from a scientific, you talked about geeking out.
Well,
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think when I talk about you're being an innovator, right? That's really what we're all about. Being an innovator. I like to clear up the definition of innovation because I think people get stuck on it's got to be this blue skies disruptive. Maybe it's technology. It's for scented markers and brainstorms, right? That's great, but that is not where 99% of it actually happens that makes an impact. And I think when you think about being an innovator, what does an innovator do? Well, they have creative thinking. right? They have problem solving skills. They have analytical thinking. They're able to be divergent and convergent. So all of that to me is part of what makes you an innovator. The thing that we solve for is, well, how do I do that?
Right.
How do I, as an everyday person? I'll tell you, I was at a conference in Kansas City, as I mentioned earlier, for the Pet Food Forum. So this is, people in the pet food industry, and not just the Purinas, the brands of the world that we know as consumers, but think of it the back of house, right? The people that do the nutrition, the additives, the shapes, the manufacturing. So these are engineers, sales, scientists, and they could not get enough of it, because I think that they started to realize, hey, I, as an operations person, am just as innovative as Jim in branding, which he gets to be, right? All the time he gets to be, because he's in marketing and they get to do the cool stuff. But I get to innovate in my world in operations too. And that means I get to make an impact in my way. And I get to be high performing and I get to be high value, but I'm going to do it my way. And Jim can do it his way, but it applies to me too. And I think that's really powerful for people. And I know there's a lot of people listening to this that are entrepreneurs. For us as entrepreneurs, it's how do I have to be as good as I can be, right? It's just me or a small team, right? We're entrepreneurs. We got to do more with less. So I got to figure out how to approach every day in my high performing self, because I need to be. And I got to figure out, well, what differentiates me in the marketplace? Like, what does my brand stand for, me personally, but also whatever my product is. So from that perspective, it opens people's eyes to what they're capable of.
It's kind of interesting as you're talking, it's potentially a reason why so many people may, leave, the corporate world and organization, because they want to explore all of this. They want to develop all of this in regards to my, innovation and change capabilities, but yet we're stifled from doing so when we're in an organizational setting. So it's like, I'm out of here, right?
Exactly. And, so when I got into this business years and years and years ago, when I jumped ship from what I was doing, so I cut my teeth in brand strategy and innovation. So I created new products for companies like General Mills, Procter & Gamble, right? All those guys, right? If you've shopped in Target or any big box, you pushed your cart past products that I've either brought to market or helped to rebrand. So great. The reason the impact is so great, I think, in all those other fields, from all those other people, entrepreneurs, people in operations, people in process, project managers, sales, right? Fill in the blank. Not the ones who I thought, because I thought the impact was going to be with those, big consumer brand people that I'd always worked with for 20 years. It was with everybody else who loved it. And it's because we all have this desire to be an innovator in some way. Right? We all want to make that contribution to our work, to our world. And it actually feels great. So what I was saying was, the other day I fixed the lock on my back door to my backyard, and it just came loose, but I did it by myself. I totally MacGyvered it. I was so excited, and it feels good. So what research actually shows is that people who are in the state of flow or creative problem solving, it actually releases dopamine. So it feels great when we're innovators, and it feels really good to solve a sticky problem or find an opportunity or just work around something. It feels really great when we're rewarded for our contributions. So that's why I think, all those other departments and people out in the world and entrepreneurs ended up being the ones that really resonated with the work, and not the ones who I thought, right? All those years of building products for all these companies, and they're like, yeah, we love innovation. And these guys are like, please give it to us. So yeah.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about your.
Not what I thought.
Well, yeah, as they say, let your audience tell you the answer, right? Okay, so
right.
When I start talking about your entrepreneurial journey, what inspired you to start your own business, and how does that align with the concept of Cherish and Conquer?
So if you look back in my career, way back, I really didn't last at a company for more than 18 months or in a role, because I always got restless. And it's surprising how I worked my way up the corporate ladder, because I did, and got to the top and realized that my ladder was on the wrong wall. So great, I had done it, but I was always a little restless. There was always something more and different that I wanted. I loved the people I worked with. I loved the work, but I just had that nagging feeling, Jim, inside of me that was like, there's something else out there for you. And I got to the top of this wall and I'm looking around and I'm thinking, oh no, is this really is this what I want? And then I had this amazing experience with a client that I'll kind of shorten it just kind of in the interest of time. But the short of it is I was hired by a company to reinvent baby care. And we came up with a whole range of brilliant ideas that was going to take them into the future. And I was really proud of the work that my team did. And when we presented the ideas, I saw them getting shut down one after the other in the room by the people. It was the VP of like every department that was in this meeting. And as I left that meeting that day and flew back home to Denver, I realized something really important. And I realized that the problem wasn't the ideas. The ideas were great. The problem was that the people in the room were jaded and they didn't see it. And I didn't communicate it in a way that was going to brought them on board for the journey. And that was on me 100%. And that was the moment when I realized, you know what? I can give people new products and new ideas all day long. The number of PowerPoint decks that I have with products that I've delivered is way more than gets to market because the people on the other side of the room were not tapping their innovator mind. And if they're not tapping it, and frankly, they probably have the ideas already. They're the ones doing the work and rolling up their sleeves. They don't need me to tell them. So that was really, I realized there was this need out there that maybe people couldn't articulate yet, but that I saw happen because I can't tell you, Jim, the number of, $250,000, $500,000 projects that I worked on that went nowhere. And then 2 years later, the new brand manager called me to do the same project over again. So I saw this need. I had this desire to do it differently than everybody else. I thought we're missing something here. And so I think that client, and I call him Mustache Man because he's the one that really shut down the ideas. I can't remember his name, but he had a very, very big Magnum PI mustache. And so I thank him every day because he made me realize there's something missing. So that's when I really jumped ship. And I'll just say that it wasn't, I opened my doors and everything went amazingly well. There were a lot of obstacles and a lot of successes and a lot of pivots along the way. It's never exactly what you think it's going to be when you leave, at least not for me.
Well, and when you think about that, it's like there was probably a whole lot of learnings and grace you had to provide to yourself. So if you start thinking about that, what are some key learnings that you had in regards about self-love and how it impacted your journey?
Yeah, I that's a great question. I think there are a couple things. The one that comes to mind immediately is you really have to remember that failure doesn't make you a failure. And so I got a lot of no's. You get a lot of no's. And there were things that I launched that didn't work. And those things don't mean that you're wrong. Maybe the execution was wrong. Maybe the timing was wrong. Maybe the client was wrong. Maybe the way you approached it was wrong. But there's a big difference between failing and being a failure. And that took me a little while because, it's your company. When you're an entrepreneur, this is your baby. And anybody calling your baby ugly really hurts. It really does. Anyone who tells you it doesn't, I don't know. They have a skin that I don't have. So I had to really learn the difference between the two along the way. And I'd say on top of that, I had to really, you mentioned it earlier, I had to really listen to my audience. What are they telling me about the no's? Is it because of how I delivered it? Is it because something's wrong in the value proposition of what I'm trying to give them? Is there friction in how they're buying it? Like you really have to be open to scrutinizing every little thing along the way and getting that feedback from it.
Okay, I've got to ask you too because it just brings several things together for me. They talk about sales and selling, and especially in the business to business world, they were saying how most sales opportunities are lost to no decision, greater than 60%. I mean, it's a massive number. And if we're talking about the requirement of innovate or die, and some people also attribute that to Peter Drucker, is that if my buyer has not tapped into their own innovative mind and I'm bringing them something innovative, how do I expect the sale to actually happen?
Okay, I'm so glad we're going to talk about this because I have so many thoughts on this. And I want to back up and say one thing, which is, you talked about no decision is the worst. So that happens a lot. Inertia is actually your biggest enemy. It's not the competition. It's inertia. And indifference, inertia and indifference. And the thing that I've learned along the way, someone said this to me a while ago, and it scared me, because I think, especially as an entrepreneur, I want people to like me, right? I want them to connect with me. So anyone who doesn't have a positive view of me is a little scary to me. But the reality is, and this is what my mentor said, he said, you want them to like you or hate you, but never in the middle. Like, they should love you or hate you. And if you're doing that, you're actually doing it right, because it means you're leaving an impact and you stand for something. And I was very afraid in the beginning to be that. As an innovator, right? That's who I am deep in my core. And I still was like trying to kind of toe the line and say the right thing and not have the challenging questions. And so indifference and inertia are your biggest enemy. But to go specifically to your question about, well, how do you sell an innovative idea into someone who's maybe not in that space, there's a couple things. And I'm all about super clear tools and tactics. So I'm going to give you something really, really concise. So here's often what happens. Jim, tell me if you've been in this situation. Oh, Jim, we tried that a million times. It'll never work because of this. I can't go for that. Yeah, but we've got these other things going on, right? They kind of talk themselves out of it because of whatever happened in the past. That's the excuses they give you. So what I've learned is something called, two things I've learned on this. One is approach those people with a lot of empathy instead of frustration. That was a mistake I made in the beginning too, because here's the deal with change. People don't fear change. They fear being changed. And so when I come to you with an innovative idea, oftentimes at a very subconscious level, what I'm saying is, this is going to make you irrelevant. You know what you've been doing for the last 20 years is no longer relevant or valuable. So people fear being changed more than change itself. So have empathy, right? Know that the way you present it, if you come in like a bull in a china shop, chances are you're going to push some kind of those fear buttons in people. But the second thing I've learned, and this is kind of the tactic that I've learned to implement, is, Jim, if you come to me and I'm trying to kind of sell in my new product or service, or it's innovative in some way, and you say, well, that'll never work, blah, 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 here's all the reasons why, right? Here's the things we tried in the past. I might say, Jim, that's great. Hey, tell me what didn't work then and what you might change to make it work now. So they're called then and now questions, and something that we created, that we found helps people's wheels get turning. So values what happened in the past. Tell me about it. I'm going to learn from that, because I'm going to learn, but I'm going to move you into the future with me. So my whole feeling, and there's a lot of other tools that I have in the toolbox around that, but my whole thing is, and what I've experienced in my journey is, you're not out there trying to convince people, because nobody wants your brilliance pushed onto them, even if it's the right idea. I mean, how many of us have had ideas that have been brilliant, but the people still say no, So we don't want them to be pushed on. The goal in sales in particular is to get people on board with you. And when they're on board with you, they'll even help you come up with a better solution for them too. So then and now questions and empathy, to me, are, of the many tools that we have just for the podcast, are key. If you do nothing else, do then and now questions.
Well, as you're talking about this, I start thinking about the ways that I would potentially approach situations. And if, someone, for example, just said, hey, just send me something, or something along those regards, my reply should be no, because I can't get into any type of dialogue whatsoever to understand where they're coming from, how we could collaborate together. And it just seems like it would be an effort in futility if I just sent something, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I do think it is, actually. I think it's a total pointless, wasted effort that nobody ever looks at. So I'm 100% with you on that. I don't think it's worth your time. What I do think is worth your time is putting out content that is so good people come to you. And I do a lot of sales, by the way, so I go out and hawk it a lot. But what I do is, I'm not just sending people information, I'm sending them places that is going to keep them in my ecosystem. So if you, Jim, if I reach out to you and I want to kind of tell you about Launch Street and the assessment and all the archetypes, and you're like, yeah, could you, I'm busy, can you send me some information? I'll say, yeah, let me send you links to these 3 resources on our website. I think actually it might help you increase your podcast listens and get some amazing guests on. So I'm going to speak directly to their need, what I think their needs are, without knowing too much. And then I'm going to send them to a place where, if I'm lucky, they're going to get lost for hours watching videos and looking at PDFs that I've put together. Do you know the book Oversubscribed? Have you heard of that, Daniel Priestley?
I've heard of Daniel Priestley, but I have not checked out that particular book.
I want to give him credit for this because I read it in his book, and it was the 7-11 rule, and the research proved it. People need, I think it's 7 hours and 11 interactions to buy from you, something like that, or it's the other way around. But the point is, you don't need to do that by emailing them 7 times or 11 times. The way to do that is to have your voice and your work and things that solve their problems out there in the world where they can get lost in it. So like, I'll give you one example of how we changed it on that. On our YouTube channel, now every video has links to all these other videos that we think that person will like based on the video they're watching. Because I want them to keep watching and keep watching. And just the other day, I found this new entrepreneur guy that I wanted to follow. And I found myself, sure enough, in one day, Jim, I watched probably 5 hours worth of his videos because I just kept going from one to the other. They were so good. And it drove me to the next one. So if you're out there spinning your wheels thinking, I keep putting my stuff out there and like I keep getting this redirect, as I like to call it, like send me information, tell me more, let me talk to some other people, I'm going to send them to places where they're going to start going into my ecosystem deeper. And here's the other thing I've learned. If they don't, they might not be the right person. So I shouldn't waste my time on people or, prospects that aren't even a good fit. And that's a hard one because we want everybody to say yes, but we're not actually for everybody.
That's for sure. Okay, so can you share a story where embracing feminine qualities or strengths help you to overcome a challenge in your business?
Well, I will tell you the shift. So when I started my career, it was in advertising on Madison Avenue in New York City at the second largest global agency. And at that point, it was like Mad Men days, really. It was the 90s, but basically it was Mad Men. So if you watch the show, that's the environment I was in. It was the same thing. So I thought that in order to play, I needed to be like one of the guys, right? Like I needed to, and I'm kind of a tomboy. So I was like, yeah, I can embrace this. And then I would buy these Ann Taylor 3-piece red matching power suits. Cause you remember that was the whole greed is good era. So from whatever that movie is. So I tried to be like one of the guys, right? Talk like them, act like them. And then I'll never forget, Jim, because one day I was sitting at the conference table and we were debating a strategy for our brand that we were working on. And all the guys were kind of saying their perspective on it. And I was the only woman at the table, and which has almost always been the case in my work. And I'm sitting there and I'm looking at them and I'm going, this doesn't sound right to me. And so I said, hey, let me give you a different perspective on it. So I gave it to them from the female perspective, from my perspective. And it was a breakthrough moment for me because it was the moment that I realized having that feminine view and coming from that different perspective was actually hugely valuable in the world. And not just because it was all men at the table, but because this is my perspective. This is who I am. So that moment changed. I threw away the 3-piece red suits after that. They weren't me. They weren't me.
Thank you for sharing that story. Okay, so then let's take that a little bit further and say, how do you combat imposter syndrome, and what advice do you have for women who struggle with it in their business?
Yeah. So I've had a lot of it over the years. I don't want to say I've shed it because I feel like at every level you get to, you're dealing with a new set of people who are also like, you look at and you go, oh, they're so amazing. And here I am at the table. I am not a fan of fake it till you make it, because I think that's actually giving your brain and yourself the opposite message because you're faking it. You're not trying to fake it. You're trying to step into it. So it's never made sense to me. One of our everyday innovators in our community, Mia is her name. She's phenomenal. And she said to me, my mantra is faith it till you make it. And that is the mantra that I've kept. And that has helped me really get over imposter syndrome, or just, I'm going to have faith, like that I'm going to step up and say the right thing and do the right thing. The other thing I've learned is the power of silence. So sometimes when we have imposter syndrome, we try to fill the air because we need to look smart. We need to look like we know what we're doing. We feel like we need to prove ourselves. Anytime I find myself in a moment where I feel like I need to prove myself, I actually stop talking because I know that's my ego trying to protect me and my imposter syndrome acting up. So I wait, I stop. And you know what, Jim, here's the great thing about it. When you do that, here's a little science behind it. You actually have the chance to take some deep breaths. which gets you out of your sympathetic system, your fight, flight, or freeze, which is what's happening, and puts you into parasympathetic, which is calmer. So I have never gone wrong by not talking for a few minutes. It has only done me well. And I'm a talker. I can fill the air. But I think, imposter syndrome is just one of those things where it's there. It's okay. I accept it as part of the process. I don't fight it, but I do faith it until I make it. And sometimes I just shut up and kind of let the ego calm down and go away before I start to really engage. Well, hopefully that answers your question.
It does. And you know what? It's really interesting when I asked this question to several other different ladies, how they respond and their perspective is of it. And I think you also had, a critical explanation of it, because you started talking about the whole neuroscience of it. And you started talking about the different brain systems that are involved with it. You mentioned breathe as one way to become a little bit more mindful and not allow yourself to do some type of default mechanism failure, right? There's a process by which, and going back to the whole, if we understand it, we can learn how to manage it and leverage it, influence it, and to do the things that are necessary so that we can thrive.
Can I tell you one more story on this?
Please.
That I think has helped me. I think about this moment a lot. So a while back in my career, I was working for Procter & Gamble, and we were doing new product development. And I'm sitting in the room. Now, Procter & Gamble, just if you don't know, they hire the best of the best, right? They are smart people in that room, really smart. They have, Ivy League. They have all the things, right? They hire the best of the best. Like, you are lucky to work at Procter & Gamble. And the people are brilliant. And I'm sitting in this room, and there's like 20 of us, and I'm the only outside person. So I'm the only consultant in the room. Everybody else is from P&G. And they're talking and they're throwing out numbers and acronyms, and I am not following along. And my first inclination was to pretend, right? So I'm nodding. I'm like, AHLs. Yes, of course. AHLs, definitely. But about halfway through, I'm realizing that I have no idea what's happening. Like, I can't keep up. So I just stop and I say, hey, everybody, listen, bear with me. I'm an outside person, but I don't know what AHLs mean. Could somebody help me out? The funniest thing happened. Nobody knew what it meant. So nobody in the room, not one person could tell me what the acronym meant or why they used it. But somebody started with it, and so everybody felt like they had to keep up. So I share that story because everybody has imposter syndrome. So, they always joke about when you're keynote speaking, imagine everybody in your underwear, which never worked for me, but, like to calm your nerves. I like to remind myself that I have imposter syndrome, but guess what? So does everybody else in the room. In one way or another, we've all got that a little bit in our brains. So you're not the only one in the room. Like, it's okay. It's okay to have it and know, like, it's okay. Everybody has it. Nobody knows what it means. It's good.
I love that perspective. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Enjoying the show? After joining Marina's Army, subscribe and share the Cherish and Conquer podcast on your favorite platform. Thank you. Now, back to the show.
Okay, so now it's time for our breakthrough blitz speed round. Are you ready to help us break through? All right.
I'm ready.
So, what's your favorite productivity tool or app?
My favorite productivity tool or app is actually an app called Record, and it's on my phone. And it's because the thing that slows me down most often is I have ideas or things I need to do and I got to remember, and then I never put them anywhere because I think I'll keep it in my brain, and then I can't remember, and then I'm spinning my wheels, and I spend all this time trying to figure stuff out. So I love Record, or any recording thing on your phone where you can just put it down in the moment you have the inspiration or the reminder that you need. So it's a small thing, but it makes a big difference for me.
So what's your favorite way to unwind after a busy day?
So my favorite way to unwind after a busy day is to walk my dogs with, this is going to sound weird, but with a weighted vest. So I like to ruck, basically.
If you could have dinner with any female business leader, living or deceased, who would it be?
Female business leader, you said, right?
Correct.
Okay. Taylor Swift. I don't like her music, but man, is she a genius businesswoman, and she built herself a brand and some wealth. So her music doesn't do it for me, but I think she's brilliant, and I would love to hear her talk.
I hear you. What's your favorite quote or mantra that keeps you motivated?
So my favorite is Man in the Arena. I think to me that is the best mantra quote. You're in there mired by dust and blood and sweat, and the victory of defeat and success, and the people in the stands don't listen to them. So if you don't know it, go look up Man in the Arena. It's one of the best speeches ever made.
What's one piece of advice that you would give to an aspiring female entrepreneur?
I would tell them to always focus and do the next step. So sometimes we stop ourselves because it's so overwhelming. We're trying to get from A to Z so fast. Always keep Z in mind, but you're experimenting, getting out there. You will learn more by doing it than you will by planning it every single day. You'll go 100 times faster if you do versus think.
Okay, here's my last question. What's the biggest misconception people have about being a female entrepreneur, and how do you address it in your own experience?
Well, first of all, they think I work in my pajamas all day. So that's number one, which is, I don't know what and they think I do laundry all day long. That's not happening. You know what? Here's the thing. I think they think that if we can do this, then we balance everything. So I'm the mom of 2 boys, right? We talked about that. I'm a solo mom, right? I got divorced 5 years ago. I have a fiance, but he doesn't live here. We've got distance things. So it's me. And I think the myth about kind of being a female entrepreneur is, we have to balance it all and do it all. But the reality is, and this is the advice I'd give to female and especially mom entrepreneurs out there, is my kids are part of my business. So they help me. And when I need to work late, my son is making dinner. And sometimes I need to leave work to go to his event at school. It just happened yesterday. And I guess, I don't know if I'm really kind of answering your question here, but to me, it's really important for us, particularly as women, to remember we don't have to do it all. And that people in our life are actually happy to be helpful to us and be a part of us building what we do. And I think they like to see us going after our dreams, but don't feel like you need to work 18 hours a day and make dinner and walk the dogs and clean the house. Other people can help.
Oh,
that was a circular answer.
It was beautiful is what it was. Tamara.
Yeah.
How does the Cherish and Conquer listeners and watchers get in touch with you?
The easiest is our website, go to launchstreet.com, all one word. So, and I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram, all the social.
Tamara, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom, and we wish you the very best.
Thanks for tuning into the Cherish and Conquer podcast from Marina. Join our community of trailblazing women at community.marina.ai and get access to exclusive resources, checklists, and guides. If you found value in today's episode, please rate, review, subscribe, and share it across your social platforms. See you soon, and remember, barriers are for breaking.
Look at me right.